In episode 1 of Barry, you get introduced to Barry Berkman. He's a former U.S. Marine who is now a hitman from Cleveland. For him, killing people is the same thing as working at a Staples. The way he gets these jobs is from a family friend named Monroe Fuchs. Fuchs is kind of like his agent. After his latest job, he gets woken up in the middle of the night by Fuchs, who lets him know that the money from the job did clear. But there's a troubling trend that Fuchs has realized with Barry. He's taking too long to do the job. Barry claims that he's doing recon, but these extra expenses, one extra night in a hotel room, it adds up. Fuchs starts telling Barry he's a little bit worried for him. Barry's current living conditions, the way he's acting, it reminds him of the old Barry before Barry had a, quote, purpose. But Barry says, nah, I think I'm just burnt out. But Fuchs can't have Barry be burnt out. He's got another job for him. The Chechen mob is called. A guy named Goran Pazan needs Barry to kill somebody, but the more important thing is the money is great. Fuchs lets him know that the flight for L.A. leaves in 4 hours, but it does leave from Ontario. He claims it's to cover Barry's tracks, but Barry knows that the real answer is it's just cheaper. About 10 hours later, Barry arrives in sunny L.A. He heads over to meet Goran, but the first person he meets is Goran's second-in-command, a guy named NoHo Hank. And NoHo Hank is unlike any gangster you've ever met, mainly just because he has the sunniest disposition. Ho welcomes Barry into the house, escorts him through it, and heads to the back where Goran's waiting. Goran doesn't do much of the talking. It's pretty much all Hank. And Hank tells Barry that the mark is going to be a guy named Ryan Madison. He's a physical trainer who started working with Goran's wife and then proceeded to really work her, if you're catching what I'm saying here. He was having sex with Goran's wife. It ain't cool. You don't do that sort of thing. Now he's got to pay. That's why they called Barry. Now, the Chechen mob don't take this lightly. They're not just going on a hunch. Hank put a lipstick camera in the hotel room and actually caught them having sex. So they have video of this to prove it. Barry tells them, give me his name, give me his address. It'll be done in a couple of days. Barry then gets a package from Fuchs in the mail, and it's the gun with the bullets, no silencer, and starts tailing Ryan all around L.A. Eventually, he tails Ryan to a building, and when Ryan goes in there, he figures it might be an hour, but it's way longer than that. Barry ends up getting bored and walking towards the building and see exactly what Ryan might be doing. And he hears a woman screaming outside. Barry thinks that there's a problem, so when he goes to check on the woman, he's pretty surprised to find that she's just an actress rehearsing some lines. Her name is Sally Reed. She's an aspiring actress, and she kind of snaps at Barry because Barry showing up kind of threw off her game. She doesn't have time to practice again because she has to go in and perform the scene, and Barry follows her in. And little did Barry know that he had tailed Ryan to Gene Cousineau's acting class. Barry just kind of chills in the back, watching Sally perform. Her first performance doesn't go to Gene's liking. He ends up calling her out on it. But from that, he ends up pulling a really great performance from her, and it blows Barry away. As the class is applauding Sally's performance, Barry hears a voice from behind him that asks, "Hey man, are you new to this class?" And it's Ryan Madison. Ryan introduces himself and explains that his partner got a catering gig, so he needs somebody to fill in. He doesn't really let Barry answer because when Gene says, "Ryan, you're up," Ryan just goes, "Yeah, I'm going to do the scene with this guy." Ryan performs a scene from True Romance, and Ryan's great. Barry is terrible. He reads his lines extremely fast, like he's just trying to get through it. But the scene was more for Ryan anyway, so no one really even notices. When the class applauds for Ryan at the very end, the applause is like a drug for Barry. His eyes get wide. Gene comes up on stage to evaluate Ryan, but he looks at Barry and says, "Who are you?" And Barry introduces himself. Gene tells him that he's used up his one free class, and if he wants to be in the class, he better be there on Thursday to perform a monologue. Even though Barry really enjoyed going to the class, he doesn't really have plans on actually going through with it. As he's trying to leave, though, he gets stopped by Sally, who invites him out to a local bar called Residuals to hang out with the rest of the class. Barry's got nothing to do, so he says, why not? Barry gets introduced to everybody in the class. There's Nick, who's from Florida, Jermaine, who's from Denver, Antonio's from Puerto Rico, and he just booked a big gig on CSI as a dead body. Natalie is from LA, and Sasha, I don't know where Sasha's from. I'll make it up. You're not going to fact check it. She's from Walla Walla, Washington. A song then comes on at the bar, and everybody wants to get up and dance. Sally tells Barry he should hit the dance floor, but he doesn't. What he does do, however, is kind of creepy. He sits in his chair and just stares at Sally. He's infatuated with her. But he's not the only one not dancing, because Ryan, who is drunk, is also not dancing. He moseys on up to Barry and tells him that Barry Berkman isn't a great stage name. He needs to go by something better, like Barry Block. Sally then comes over and asks Barry if he can drive Ryan home because Ryan has a lot of DUIs. Barry tells her, yeah, no problem. And then Sally kisses him on the cheek, so you can say things are getting pretty hot and heavy between the two. When Barry gets to Ryan's place, he tells Ryan that he doesn't think he can take the class, and Ryan thinks that's ridiculous, telling him he has to take this class. He even gives Barry Gene's book, saying that it changed his life. He's also willing to help Barry out with his monologue. The fact that Ryan is being such a nice guy takes Barry completely off guard. He can't kill him. Before Ryan leaves for the night, he gives Barry a big hug and then heads in. But Barry was completely unaware of the fact that he was being watched by the Chechen mob, and they saw that hug. They are very concerned. They call up Fuchs to voice their concern, and Fuchs actually goes so far as to fly to LA to talk to Barry about it. Feels like Barry's getting way too close to his mark. Barry explains that he followed Ryan all over town, but eventually he followed him to an acting class. He then hung out with the class, and they made him feel really good about himself. Fuchs, however, can't understand why Barry hung out with the guy he's supposed to kill, and he didn't just kill him. But Barry couldn't kill him because he's focused on his purpose. He thinks acting could be it, and Fuchs knows it's not. Fuchs knows that his purpose is killing people. Now, it's not like Barry is completely delusional. He does realize that most actors don't make a living doing it, so he figures he can do both. He can act during the day and do hits for Fuchs at night. Fuchs has to sit him down, though, and explain to him that that's a risk not worth taking. You don't want to go to a hit and have the guy recognize you from a commercial. He explains to Barry that once he took this job, he kind of closed the door on being anything else. When Barry starts talking about how Ryan isn't a bad guy, Fuchs cuts him off and says, you gotta kill him. These Chechens are no joke. They're the scariest people I've ever dealt with. They're talking about taking you off this job, so get it done. Barry tells Fuchs that he understands, and the next day, while he heads to the acting class, he doesn't actually go in. He just hails Ryan. But he knows where Ryan lives, and he knows where Ryan hangs out, so it's not like he can't afford himself one distraction, and that distraction is Gene. When Gene walks out after everybody else left, Barry walks up to him and asks if he thinks that Barry has what it takes to be an actor. And Gene tells him, no, you are horrible. He actually goes so far as to tell Barry to go back to wherever he came from and do whatever he's good at, because acting is not it. Barry nods and says, you want to know what I'm good at? Killing people. He goes into his life story about returning from Afghanistan, being depressed, and then a family friend who's like an uncle to him made him realize he had a purpose. The problem is, while this story is true, it's so absurd that Gene thinks it's a monologue. He's so blown away by the performance that he tells Barry, you're in, but you have to pay in cash and you have to pay up front. And that's not a problem for Barry whatsoever. Barry Berkman, who, by the way, is now going by Barry Block, is officially an actor. But he's also a hitman, so he has to do that job too. And he heads to Ryan's house, goes up to Ryan's car to kill him, but he finds Ryan already dead. He looks down the street and sees the Chechen mob. They got to him first. And now they're aiming their guns at Barry. Luckily for Barry, the gun is jamming, and Barry doesn't take too kindly to the fact that they're pointing guns at him. He warns them to put the guns down. All the while, NoHo Hank is banging on the roof for the guy to fix the gun and kill Barry. But by the time the Chechen does fix the gun, Barry unloads a clip into him. Barry gets rid of the gun and heads to a local diner to get some food. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.